Well, I'd like to introduce today our testimony. It's from David Humphries. Now, David and his family have been in our church for decades. They're one of the beginning families in our church, so it's wonderful to hear a generational story, in a sense, of God's faithfulness. David's story is very much about God's grace, his provision, and his healing. And those of you that know him will understand his dry sense of humour.
Is this my best side? Or this? Neither. Thanks a bunch. Where can you find good support? I'll talk to you more about that later. COVID-19 haircut. It's a safe option since for me this was also my COVID-16, 15, 14 haircut, and every year back to COVID-04, just post-SARS. We don't all live with a hairdresser. When Carl asked me whether I'd share my story as part of the Testimony Tuesday series, I of course said yes. But then I scratched my head wondering whether the full story would take an entire series. Then I thought about whether I could do a whiteboard and a flowchart, but anyone who's had general anaesthetic followed by a load of new medication will tell you that flow is a rather ambiguous term. So I'm instead going to give you a very condensed backstory and a fuller version of recent history. I was diagnosed with diabetes nearly 42 years ago. If I told you the age I was diagnosed, then you'll be reaching for your calculators, but let's just leave it at that. From early on, I had a tricky relationship with BS, that's blood sugar, and one of the long-term effects of that relationship was kidney damage. About 20 months ago, routine blood testing revealed that my kidney function was approaching a level known as ESKD, which is end-stage kidney disease, which would have necessitated a kidney transplant, possibly preceded by dialysis. My sister Fiona, thank you Fiona, volunteered to be a live kidney donor for me and went through the necessary screening so that she could, for all that to take place. Another option was on the table, which was an SPK, a simultaneous pancreatic kidney transplant, which would provide a cure not only for kidney disease but also for diabetes. What a dream. But it's okay to dream, isn't it? Because out of dreams comes belief, and belief plus prayer makes miracles. Fast forward to last June when I was assessed in Auckland for suitability for this surgery and confirmed as being on the list. I'm told to not expect anything before February this year. I thought to myself on Friday the 7th of February that I should probably have a go bag ready, just like the FBI. But I never got around to it. Of course, Murphy's Law and God's sense of timing and sense of humour dictated that I got a call at 2 o'clock on the following morning to say that the organs were available and could I get up to Auckland as soon as possible. Of course I said yes, and Mum and I were up there by 8:30 a.m. I was taken into the theatre at 11:30, prepared by medical staff, and just before the first shot of fentanyl, the anaesthetist said, "Look over in the corner," and I saw the surgeons preparing my new pancreas and kidney on the table and felt such a sense of peace before any fentanyl and knew that this was another extension of God's grace over my life that I've experienced for such a long time, even if I haven't always acknowledged it as such. Surgery was 9 hours long, and with very positive feedback from the surgical staff. I was 9 days in hospital, followed by 4 weeks of daily blood tests and clinic visits. My doctors have been amazed at the progress that I've made, despite a couple of minor speed bumps. And again, I have to highlight God's grace and some good genes, both of which I can indirectly thank my parents for. So God has been at the centre of this from way before I was aware of any medical problems. I received my surgery a week before another recipient from Christchurch with a somewhat similar medical history. He'd been waiting 2 years for his surgery. God had those organs available for me at the perfect time. I didn't need to suffer dialysis. And yes, someone died for those organs to be available for me. Perfectly healthy and a perfect match to my blood type and tissue type. But as Christians, we're very close to the reality of someone sacrificing their life for us to live. I said at the beginning that I'd talk more about support. I'm so aware and so grateful for the prayer support from family, friends, Life Church, Life Group. Everyone should get themselves a Life Group, prayer chain, and the wider church community. You prayed for a miracle, and I'm walking proof of the miraculous. For all of you who have faithfully lifted up my situation in prayer, thank you so much. Don't stop now, because I'm a long way from perfect, just a step closer. Thanks for listening.
So you've heard David's story, an incredible story of God's provision for him. And I want to encourage you today to think about where God's grace has been in your life that maybe you haven't seen, or maybe sometimes we get to see it in a different perspective. But God's grace is always at work in us. So thanks, David, for your story today, and we look forward to hearing another story next week.